Hey up lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. We're going to finish off the destroyers and look at them. We have the Quaoar left and the Winged Hussar. So I'm going to jump into the Quaoar now and let's go through it, talk a bit about it and talk a bit about what sort of upgrades and stuff you want. So the Quaoar is an interesting ship. It's sort of as the base railgun type anyway. It's more or less the same as the Eris heavy cannon. If we have a look at the railgun system here, so you have the bow mounted railgun's got 450 damage per hit. You've got railgun turrets, they're not quite as good, but if we go in, we can see in here you got plenty of cooldown options. You have the reduced aiming time to increase firing speed, which also the HC Eris has. So yeah, it's generally pretty decent. It can definitely fit into a position similar to the heavy cannon Eris. It has it's a little less on the damage on the DPM in comparison to the Eris, if I remember rightly. But you know, it's fine. It's not got the dodge rate of the Eris. I believe it has slightly more HP. We can check that. So we've got 28,000 there. We look at the HCRS, 27,960. So is that less actually? It's the same. So it is mid-row though, which does give it a slight edge in survivability. Obviously, this is still going to get smacked around by missiles and torps, but not being on the front line, it's not going to need the evasion quite as much, but it is still mid-row, so it is going to get hit by missiles quite a bit. So I'd recommend starting off with the armor system here, at least going for the double HP. You can pick up the extra armor here as well. Gives you 8 extra armor, bringing you to 28, which isn't particularly great, so I'd probably ignore that after picking up the HP. And then I'd move on down into the weapon systems, where I would be ideally, you'd be picking up the frigate destroyer, double hit rates here. The double cooldowns would go down well as well, leaving you 2 slots left where you could pick up the full firepower mod and one of the damage mods, or potentially a strategy. Again, this strategy though, I don't personally recommend. It generally doesn't do enough for the amount of tech points that you need to put into it, I feel. Because a cooldown, 80% cooldown every 90 seconds for 8 seconds just really isn't that particularly good anyway. So yeah, it's something I'd probably ignore. After that, you can, finish off the armor system. There are only 2 systems on here, so it's a pretty cheap ship to upgrade, really, if you don't upgrade the cruising speed, because it is at 850 anyway, so it fits into that 850 fleet quite nicely. But this will get fast enough to go into the 1,000 plus fleets, so you can use it in, say, like those small frigate fleets as well that are like really quick getting around. It will fit in those quite well. So in that case, you will be picking up the double cruise speed and the warp speed, but again, like I've said on a few occasions now, just as you need, pick up the warp and the cruise depending on the rest of your fleet. Sometimes this is a complete waste of time because you stock at 850. Say you got IOs in your fleet, this is no point upgrading the propulsion there at that point. You can upgrade the warp though, I think. So I think the IO warp is a little bit faster than 4,700. 4,250. I think it goes around 5,000. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, so the railgun, basically a heavy cannon Eris, but in mid-row, which is quite nice. It's got a little less DPM. It's a cool looking ship, so yeah, it's pretty decent. Definitely check it out, try it out. If you're missing the heavy cannon Eris, this is it's almost a replacement. Again, not front row, not got the evasion, so it hasn't got that sort of pseudo dodge tank going for it, but being mid-row means it's going to stay alive probably a bit better than the HC Eris, as long as your front row is decent anyway, allowing it to get a bit more DPM down range and can quite possibly out DPM an Eris over a longer battle, as long as your front row stays up. We then have the torpedo type. Now this is actually a really good ship as well. Both the Quaoar types are decent. So again, we are looking, middle row, so you don't have to worry too much about the armor, but I'd still recommend picking up the double HP first, and then moving over to the weapon, because this is just going to keep it on the board a bit longer, keep that main DPM down, you know, for a little bit longer, because then you're not wasting just the base DPM in the first place. This has these beautiful little cluster torpedo on the front doing 350 damage per hit. Again, it's got the 1x8 attacks per round, so it's actually hitting quite a lot. It's basically like a mini Callisto. It also has the missile launcher array. This is anti-aircraft. I don't think I've ever seen it shoot at aircraft, but you know, it's there as well. It's also on the same system anyway, so you're going to be buffing it regardless. In here, my recommendations are, first off, picking up the hit rate against cruisers. You can technically ignore this. I choose not to. It's personal preference here. I do notice a slight increase in DPM overall, especially the longer the battles wear on. So I do recommend picking that up. The strategy on this is also pretty good, but I do recommend picking it up maybe closer to the end once you got like the standard DPM down, because it's not necessarily only going to be attacking cruisers, and this only affects it when attacking cruisers. If it's attacking frigates and destroyers, it's not really going to help out too much in that case. So that being said, and you have basically no other hit rate buffs, you can ignore the hit rate here, going double cooldown into, I quite like the crit on here, the increased chance to cause crit damage. But I would pick up the double cooldown, the double damage, into the crit damage, and then you can either pick up the hit rate or you can pick up the heavy ammo, depending on how many cruisers you start seeing in enemy fleets. I have seen some fleets running Jaegers and stuff like that, so in that situation, this actually helps out quite a bit, and it will increase its damage considerably once it starts targeting them. Bear in mind as well that Jaegers, I believe, are mid-row. Are they mid-row or back-row? I can't remember off the top of my head. Either way, it is a torpedo, so it's in direct fire, so it will start targeting things like cruisers pretty early on. Battleships, carriers, battle cruisers, cruisers. So it is in that situation where if you are running that kind of anti-carrier fleet, anti-heavy fleet, this is actually a pretty good pick. Again, mid-row as well, so it's going to be a little bit safer in that row. And it's just going to chunk. Like, it gets up to a pretty considerably decent DPM, especially at only 6 CP cost. Propulsion-wise, pretty much exactly the same as the base. Pick up the double cruising speed if you need it. If not, pick up the warp speed, but pick and choose there as you need, depending on your fleet's lowest propulsion speeds. And then, yeah, obviously you have the remaining armor that you can pick up for the extra 8 damage mitigation. To be honest, you could probably ignore that if you don't want to see the maxed out Quaoar. So yeah, there you go. So that is the Quaoar. It's a great little ship. Both types are pretty decent. I run the torpedo type occasionally when I start seeing people trying to run the anti-carrier fleets to try and just kill your carriers off as fast as possible, so they take longer to rebuild. I do start running the Quaoar Torp version at that point. I don't typically run the railgun type because my front row is my Eris, and I kind of need that on the front row because of the evasion and stuff like that. It acts quite nicely as like that sort of pseudo tank damage dealer in the front row, so I don't run the railgun type as much. But if you are missing the heavy cannon Eris and you just need some really good damage output, the railgun type works pretty well in that situation. So there you go, that is the Quaoar. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.